Formula 1 has been around for many a year. Now, within these years, we've of course had some banger seasons, but at the same time, we've also had some pretty stinky ones at that. But in today's video, I want to talk about one of the craziest F1 seasons I've read up on about, and that would have to be the season where there was 11 different race winners and 38 drivers taking place in this season. This is the 1982 F1 season. Now, before I actually talk about the 1982 season, I need to tell you a few things about it to make sure you know everything going into this season. So first off, the points were different. If you're a new F1 fan or don't remember the old point system, the old point system used to be first place to sixth place. First place gets 9 points, second place is 6, third place is 4, fourth place is 3, fifth place is 2, and sixth place is 1. Those were the only points you got. There was no fanning about with sprint racing. There was no fastest laps during this era of F1. Now, also going into this season, there was this thing called pre-qualifying because there was a new rule where more F1 teams could enter. However, not all of them could actually be on the grid, so they'd do these pre-qualifying things for the worst teams. So that's why I'll show now there's a lot of did not qualifies for anyone who does not know what that will mean later on in the video. So going into the 1982 season, the reigning world champion was Nelson Piquet, who won it last year with Brabham. And I will talk about Brabham first, because this sort of really does set the scene for how chaotic this season just was. Now, Brabham, it wasn't a slow car in 1982. By all means, definitely not the best car as well, though. It was around the top 10 always in qualifying, but I can't say the same for the races. Brabham managed 20 DNFs combined. So 10 DNFs each for Piquet and Patrese. Remembering there were only 16 races in this calendar season. So both of them only actually finished 6 races. And the reason I did want to talk about Brabham first is because it was the 80s. The reliability of the F1 cars back in these days was just atrocious. Now, I say that. There was one team with one driver who didn't actually have that many DNFs. They raced 11 of the races, and it was actually Alboretto's Tyrrell. Shame it was a shitbox. Because, yeah, it was competing in every race. However, it wasn't the fastest car. And it tended to be that because he was consistent and everyone else was getting loads of retirements, that's why he got more points than that Brabham deserved. But yeah, it definitely wasn't the year for Brabham. But with that covered, let's actually have a look at the serious contenders for this season, which were Ferrari, McLaren, Renault, and Williams. Now, we'll talk about Ferrari first because this was one of the most heart-wrenching seasons for Ferrari itself. Standings-wise, they actually still came first in the Constructors with 74 points. Congratulations to them. But the way it happened wasn't the best. They actually lost both of their first 2 drivers in the season. Of course, Gilles Villeneuve sadly got his life taken away from him in the 5th race of the season in Belgium when he had an incident with the March driver Mas. Very unfortunate for Gilles Villeneuve and his family, and of course, just the whole Ferrari team. Because this is obviously something that is not very nice to have happen. And then not only did this happen to Ferrari during this season, but their driver who looked dead set to win the championship, he was 9 points ahead of his closest rival, who was Watson in the McLaren, was of course Pironi, sadly in the German Grand Prix, on a practice session, testing out new tyres, crashed into the Renault of Alain Prost, and the incident was so severe he never raced again in F1. His legs were so damaged from the incident he just could never race again, which is such a heartbreaking season for those two and just Ferrari as a team as a whole, considering they did win the Constructors. And on the surface of things, if you don't know about the season, it looked like a decent season for Ferrari, but then when you know the background of Villeneuve dying and Pironi of course, not being able to race ever again, basically. It was a very bittersweet season for Ferrari, much more on the bitter side. Now, on the other side, you had McLaren, who came second in the Constructors with 69 points. they managed 4 race wins this season as well, with the partnership of Niki Lauda and Watson. Now, Watson actually looked like a serious title contender. He managed to get 39 points throughout the season. Of course, like I've said about the Brabham before, sadly, the McLaren wasn't as retirement prone as the Brabham, but the retirements really hindered both Lauda and Watson, which is such a shame to see for Watson as well, because Watson doesn't get spoken about a lot, but this man was leading the championship in 1982 by 10 points in Canada. He had 30 points to his closest rival, who at the time was Pironi, on 20 points, which back in the day is a massive gap. That's more than a race win. But he could only manage 9 points for the rest of the 8 races during the season. And just like the McLarens, it was similar for the Renault boys. Now, Prost actually started off the season getting 2 race wins, really setting the pace, making everyone think, you know, and Renault did have a pretty quick car, that potentially Prost or his teammate Arno could win the championship. Mainly Prost from the start of it. However, like McLaren, and even worse, more like Brabham, they just could not finish any race. Prost would manage 8 DNFs over the 16 race calendar, with Arno managing 10 DNFs as well. So 18 combined, when it could happen 32 times, over 50% of the races they DNF'd out of. And when you look at the stats as well, which I'll show you now, most races Prost and Arno did compete in and finish, they would be high up. Genuinely, Prost also had the best qualifying average that season, with Arno not too far behind. The Renault was rapid, it just could not finish a race. So it was such a shame to see for the Renaults. However, it did mean during this season that one driver in one team could take advantage of this, purely because of consistency. And of course, that was KK Rosberg, father of Brittany Rosberg. Now, this is the main part that makes this season so crazy as well. KK Rosberg only managed 1 race win, which was at the Swiss race. Now, he got a few podiums over the season, and that's basically what got him the championship. Of course, he got very lucky with Pironi sadly not being able to finish the season. Also, with Watson just falling off a cliff because that McLaren just could not finish a race in that second half of the season. So KK Rosberg just slowly got the points to push up and up and up. And I'll show right now just how weird this season was, because put it into like actual points that are used in today's standards, KK Rosberg only got around 150-ish points. Now, in the last season we just had, that won't even get you top 7. So, like, there was just so many drivers just picking up points randomly. And with the 11 different race winners, plus all the retirements, everyone just wasn't scoring that many points. Like, of course, 44 points doesn't seem high. And it's not. Back in the day, even that's not very good. You still want to be getting around 50 to 60, which would be a pretty decent season. And then another stat that just shows how dominant Max Verstappen was last season, plus showing how badly unreliable the cars were in the 80s, especially this season. Look at Verstappen and the rest of the field's points using the 1982 point system. It's mental. But the way the season just unveiled, with so many different drivers, with so many different teams getting wins, it was anyone's game. And luckily for KK Rosberg, just by competing every race, with so many people getting DNFs as well, he just had to drive. He just finished the races and he got the championship. I mean, just listen to this stat. Now, in today's standard, it's normal. However, in 1982, like I've already said, with people getting like 8 DNFs, 10 DNFs, all of them, like 5 DNFs even still was bad. KK Rosberg only got 3 DNFs that season. And the Williams also, and the Williams was quick, but also, to give KK Rosberg credit, that Williams wasn't the top dog. Like, I think the best way to show how quick each car was is by showing the qualifying averages, because obviously then you can get a sort of gist of how the cars were working before they retired. And it very clearly shows KK Rosberg never actually really qualified that well. He got 1 pole position. That's about it. It was definitely between Renault when they actually wanted to finish a race. Ferrari as a car itself, they just had so many issues during that season. Obviously personal issues with the drivers, sadly. And obviously that's going to have an effect on the team because they had to have so many different drivers throughout the season. So then it led to such a weird championship battle that wasn't one of the closest by any means, but definitely one of the weirdest we've seen and one of the lowest scoring championship battles we've had. And a few extra facts to show you how weird this season was and to show you why it was a bit jammy how KK Rosberg got his championship. Well, I'll just show you right now. Pironi almost managed to still win the championship with 39 points, only 5 points behind KK Rosberg, without doing 31.25% of the races of the season. That's almost a third of the season he didn't compete in, and he almost still won the championship. That's just showing how unlucky he is. It was his season to win. Williams only managed 4th in the constructors, showing if any other constructor just could finish, if McLaren or Renault could just finish a race, they definitely would have won a championship as well. And of course, like I've said multiple times in this video, there were 11 different race winners, and I'll tell you each and every different race winner right now. You had Prost, you had Lauda, you had Pironi, you had Watson, you had Patrese, you had Piquet, you had Arno, you had Tambay, you had Elio De Angelis, Rosberg, and Alboreto. Now, that means a Lotus won a race, a Brabham won a race, a Williams won a race, a Ferrari won a race, I forgot to say it, but I'll say it here, a Tyrrell won a race, a McLaren won a race, and a Renault won a race. That's 6 different constructors. Now, there are a lot more constructors back in the day. However, if you saw that last season, everyone would be flipping shit. So it really just does show how insane everything was in this season. But I think that about wraps up a summary of how the 1982 season went down. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and hey, I'll see you all later and have a good week. Bye bye.